Namo Amitabha Amitabha Buddha. Today is the Lunar New Year of 2024, which is the Chinese New Year. I'd like to briefly greet you all. The Spring Festival is here. It means spring is coming. The 4 seasons have begun and the grass and trees are flourishing. We are starting a new year, a new beginning. If you can keep yourself up to date every day, then you should be consistent with daily updates. So today is a day for us to reflect on the past and to be diligent. And it is a great time to keep innovating for the future. As the old saying goes, a day's journey begins in the morning, and a year's journey begins in the spring. In the beginning of a new year, Buddha reciters start another year with Buddha recitation. And this year's expectation for everyone is to develop the habit of reciting the Buddha's name. As Buddha reciters, we must develop the habit of Buddha recitation. Venerable Master said, develop the habit of Buddha recitation and live a better life as you recite the Buddha's name. In the new year, we will both develop and practice the habit of Buddha recitation as part of our lives. Let's tell a story. Master Honen had many disciples, and one of them was Chan Sheng Fang. Originally, Chan Sheng Fang was a great virtuous senior monk of the Tiantai sect, and he was a long-term practitioner of Tiantai's teachings, Samatha and Vipassana, which is the holy path. However, as he furthered his cultivation practice, he realized that his talent was unable to keep up with the teachings of the Tiantai sect. So he said, I really can't keep up with the Tiantai's teachings. Therefore, the practice of the holy path makes it difficult for mortals to achieve the Samatha and Vipassana. Yu Yongchu Zi once visited Master Jinyuan, who was retreated at Fufuyan Temple on Mount South Shi Putuo. The two of them talked for a long time, and when they were about to say goodbye to each other, Master Jinyuan held his hand and exhorted him. Since ancient times, the ancient patriarchs under the Zen sect once said that the Tiantai teachings of doctrinal and meditative, if there is no one to pass them down to propagate them, it is to the time when the Buddha Dharma will be extinguished. Nowadays, this is not the case. Yunchun Zi asked the Venerable Master Jinyuan why he said that. What is the reason? Master Jinyuan said with a sigh, today's Buddhism tends to decline more and more. The talents of all sentient beings are shallow. Practice on the Samatha and Vipassana and being able to get out of life and death is not 1 or 2 out of 10,000 people. Only the Pure Land Dharma Gate can be relied upon. Assuming that if there is no one to propagate, pass on, or practice the Pure Land Dharma, then the Buddha's teachings have really been extinguished. As disciples of the Buddha, we should especially encourage each other. Therefore, sentient beings at the end of the Dharma era can only rely on the Buddha recitation Dharma path in order to be 100% free from birth and death. Like this Chan Sheng Fang. The deeper he went, the more he realized that he could not keep up with such a practice. So finally, Chan Sheng Fang gave up all the knowledge and practice he had accumulated and accepted the Master Honen's teachings of Buddha recitation. The teachings of Master Honen's Buddha recitation is completely based on what our Pure Land Sex Master Shandao advocated. That is also centered around teaching on 2 kinds of deep faith, which reference the object of sentient beings and the deliverance of Amitabha Buddha, that is for us to face our own talent, to face the fact that the teachings and practice of the holy path are unable to save us, the low talents beings. Rebirth is not by one's own strength, but is entirely by Amitabha's Buddha power. Chan Sheng Fang, who had taken refuge in Master Honen at that time, was a representative of a firmly and single-minded practice of Buddha recitation, especially among all the disciples of Master Honen. He was known as the firm and faithful Chan Sheng Fang. Chan Sheng Fang once asked Master Honen a lot of questions, and Master Honen answered his questions accordingly. Many of them have been passed down to this day. On today's special day, we are going to talk about one of them. At that time, Chan Sheng Fang asked Master Honen, I know for sure that as long as I recite Namo Amitabha, I can be reborn in the Pure Land of ultimate bliss. On this basis, how should we spend our time before we are dying? I think many people have this question. We are still in the Saha world. What are the guidelines for a Buddha reciter to live by? Master Honen started by answering in general. The way we should live in this life is by reciting the Buddha's name. If there is any obstacle to reciting the Buddha's name, then you should remove those obstacles. The life given to us should be spent in an effortless way, which is by reciting the Buddha's name. What hinders the Buddha recitation should be rejected and abandoned. It means that we have been given this rare human body and listened to the difficult to hear Buddha Dharma, and among all the Dharma taught by the Buddha, we have chosen the Buddha recitation Dharma path, which is difficult to say, difficult to believe, and difficult to come across. This is the hardest of the hardest, and there is nothing more hard than this. Therefore, every day we live in this life, we should try our best to recite the Buddha's name. Anything that hinders the Buddha's recitation should be discarded without hesitation. Currently, this is the living standard our Buddha reciters should follow in the Saha world. This is the way it is. At first glance, it seems like nothing. But if you think about it, it's a very stern statement. Everything we do must be based on the principle of being convenient to recite the Buddha's name. Now let's think about it. Many of us only think of Buddha recitation when we go to the temple or attend a group practice. But what about the rest of the time? As Shakyamuni Buddha said in the Infinite Life Sutra, people of the world, being weak in virtue, engage in strife over matters that are not urgent. They tend to spend more time on worldly matters that are not urgent. For example, on the New Year's vacation, they want to spend more time on parties, dinners, karaoke, and other worldly matters. On the contrary, we think there are things we don't need to do, so we can recite the Buddha's name for a little while longer. There are many such situations, aren't there? For example, if we don't go to karaoke, we can have more time to recite the Buddha's name. So things that are not essential to do can be done needlessly. Therefore, we Buddha reciters must take the statement of Master Honen seriously and re-examine our lives, especially in the new year, the new beginning. We have to rearrange our life of Buddha recitation. Then Master Honen gave a few examples of how we can live. We have a life with more time for Buddha recitation. First, he said, If you cannot settle in one place to recite the Buddha's name, then go everywhere to recite the Buddha's name. That means, if you cannot stay in one place to recite the Buddha's name, then you can travel and walk to recite the Buddha's name. If you can't walk and recite the Buddha's name, then stay in one place and settle down to recite the Buddha's name. In the past, there were monks who settled in a particular place to cultivate, and there were also traveling monks. Whether one settles in one place or travels everywhere, there is no better or worse way. What we are based on when we decide the way of handling things, that allows us to have more time to recite the Buddha's name, that is how we value and basing our choice on. For example, if you are more likely to be able to recite the Buddha's name, then you can walk around. If you like to socialize and settle down to recite, then you can socialize and settle down to recite. That is, whatever lifestyle will help you recite the Buddha's name, you can go for it. This is the first example given by Master Honen. Master Honen went on to give an example of this. If you become a monk, but cannot have more time to recite the Buddha's name, then you should return to the lay life and recite the Buddha's name at home. If you cannot have more time to recite the Buddha's name at home, then you should become a monk and recite the Buddha's name. Which means, if you leave conventional life and cannot recite the Buddha's name in the midst of pursuing the path, then you should return to your layman's life and recite the Buddha's name. And if you can't recite at home, leave the conventional life and recite the Buddha's name in the midst of seeking the way. For example, if you become a monk and recite the Buddha's name, it may not be easy for some people. If you can recite the Buddha's name at home, then you don't have to be a monk. If you stay at home, like what the Buddha said in the Nirvana Sutra, at home when private life and work are so disturbed, there is no time to practice. If you're at home and because of your work don't have time to do Buddha recitation, then become a monk. So no matter what, for a Buddha reciter, what should he do or not do in his life? The only guideline for judgment is, if it enables us to have more time for recitation, then we can do it. If it doesn't enable us to have more time, then we should give it up without any question. Because Buddha recitation is the most important thing. This name is our essence for life. That's why it's so important. When Buddha recitation and other issues get in the way, choose the Buddha recitation without any doubt. That's the right thing to do. Buddha recitation and other issues don't constitute multiple choice questions, because everything else is negotiable. Buddha recitation for rebirth cannot be negotiated. No matter what you do, you must choose Buddha recitation first and foremost. Buddha recitation is a unique existence. That's why Master Honen once even said, even if you're not working, you must know that Buddha recitation is the priority. This is a good example of the relationship between work and Buddha recitation. One cannot live in this world without doing something else. Even if we have to do something else, how we should adjust the relationship between Buddha recitation and work. We must know that Buddha recitation is the priority, is the first and fundamental thing. Any other tasks are for the sake of Buddha's recitation. That's what I mean. Don't think that work is a priority and that Buddha recitation is something you do only when you have time. Don't go the opposite way. According to the world, your work is your first priority. Thinking that Buddha recitation is only a secondary thing, or that Buddha recitation is to bless me to be rich, so that my company can run smoothly. Buddha recitation is for worldly endeavors. That's the opposite. Buddha recitation is so important and solemn. How can it be reversed? How can you do it for the sake of small worldly benefits? For the sake of impermanent and perishable things. Right? So we must remember that the Buddha recitation is the priority and the fundamental thing to do. Okay. Next, Master Honing continues to give an example. If you can't recite the Buddha's name alone, then get together with your fellow practitioners to recite the Buddha's name together. If you can't get together with fellow practitioners, then recite it yourself. This is, in fact, an explanation of the difference between some people like to get together with a group of people to do Buddha recitation because they think that they can help each other and remind each other. Doing the Buddha recitation alone inevitably leads to a scattered mind. As one recites, one's mind may wander off to have fun. But if we all recite together, well, it will be more focused. There's a mutual support for each other. Some people prefer to recite silently. If they're used to practicing alone, then they can practice on their own. In any case, whether we practice together or on our own, then recite the Buddha's name according to your own convenience, using effortless as the guideline. Of course, if we're in a temple, we still have to attend the communal practice. If it's time to attend communal recitation, then you should attend. And if it is time for recitation on your own, then you should do it on your own. So this is the passage about how the Master Honing chooses between communal practice and self-practice. How to choose? And the criterion for choosing is still whichever way helps you to recite the Buddha's name. Then you choose whichever way to recite the Buddha's name. Mr. Honing gave another example. If you say you're unable to recite Buddha's name because you can't make ends meet, then ask others to help you. If you feel embarrassed to accept help from others, then do it on your own. This means that Buddha reciters, if you're unable to support yourself with food, clothing, etc., you should rely on the help of others to support you so that you can recite the Buddha's name. If you can't rely on others' help, then so you can recite the Buddha's name, then do it while living on your own. It is like many people have the concept that although they talk about reciting the Buddha's name, they are unable to even support their own lives. So how can they talk about reciting the Buddha's name? You see, many people make excuses like this. Master Honen said, in that case, even if I can get help from others, I can still recite the Buddha's name. Buddha recitation can take place in any situation. Buddha recitation is not an obstacle to anything. Especially our Buddha recitation Dharma path, it's the easy path. The Buddha recitation can be practiced throughout our lives. It can be practiced when we walk, stand, sit, and lie down. That's why Master Shen has said that we should recite the Buddha's name when we walk, stand, sit, and lie down, so it is not an obstacle to our lives. It is not like the practice of the holy path. You have to be dedicated time and better be able to give up your family and your desires and be completely engaged in this state of practice. Buddha recitation Dharma path doesn't need to be like this. It is perfectly adapted to our mortal state of life, in our original state of life, and in our original aspect of life, to recite the Buddha's name. So Buddha recitation can be done in any situation. So if we can clearly recognize the importance of being reborn in the land of ultimate bliss, we can understand that it is more important than living in this world. Like some monasteries, as long as you are motivated to recite the Buddha's name diligently, they will supply you with food and clothing. I used to be on a retreat reciting the Buddha's name in a monastery, and when it was time to eat, someone would bring me vegetarian food. So Buddha recitation cannot pose any obstacle to our lives. Master Honing continued further and said, whether it is a wife or a relative, if their existence can support the Buddha recitation, then that is very good. If they would hinder with the Buddha recitation, then there's no need to establish such karmic relationships. Very strict. That is to say, as Buddha reciters, Even their marriage is decided, and whether or not it is possible to recite the Buddha's name as the criterion. Like some of our lotus students who have not yet gotten married, if you don't have a chance to become monks and choose to be a layman, then the decision to get married should also be based on how convenient it is for them to recite the Buddha's name. If you find a person who is also a Buddhist or Buddha reciter to form a Buddhist family and support each other to achieve a supportive and smooth rebirth and dying, that is great. Generally speaking, after marriage one will have less time for oneself and less time for Buddha recitation. And if one's spouse doesn't support one's own decision for Buddha recitation, it would be a problem. It will be a problem, and one shouldn't choose what shakes one's beliefs, including the visiting of relatives, which is also based on whether it is supportive of Buddha recitation. Among one Master Shendao's teachings, the Dharma School of Contemplation and Recitation, he said, always be alone, do not gather, avoid proselytized people who change your faith, stay close to good friends, be in touch with a wise teacher, and treat him as if he were a Buddha. Hold on to one's own will, always be gentle, observe equality in all things, avoid the neighbors, and keep away from the relatives. Keep away from the relatives. These advice and instructions are all golden words. One should learn to stay alone, stay on one's own. Avoid people who hinder our faith and Buddha's recitation. Always stay close to the good advisors who strengthen and support our faith in Buddha recitation. The Master Shendao also told us to stay away from relative and neighbor gatherings. Why? Even if they are relatives, they are all karmic gatherings. If they prevent us from achieving the major goal of liberation, then they are not an augmentative cause of liberation, we should stay away from them. I once read an allusion about Dhammaganja, who once prayed for 5 cities before his master. He made 5 great vows. He said, may I become homeless. May I become a person with no possessions to eat or drink. May I become a widower, an orphan with no relatives or friends. May I become a person who will meet no one. And may I have no worldly blessings as small as sesame seeds. After making the vow, he went to the silent land, practiced diligently and persistently, and eventually attained samadhi. Therefore, for the former cultivators, the first thing they had to do in cultivation was to stay away from relatives and friends, which is totally different from our worldly ways. We're the worldly people. Seek to have a happy family, but in fact, as cultivators, they're categorized as inauspicious. Why? Just as the Infinite Life Sutra says, if they own fields, are concerned about them, if they have houses, they away with them. They are also anxious about their systematic animals, such as cows and horses, about their male and female servants, money, wealth, clothes, food, and furnishings. With deepening troubles, they sigh repeatedly. People without religion, whatever you have, you will cling to it. So when I studied Buddhism, I once thought about this one issue. Would it be good if I were an orphan? Am I avoiding my responsibility as a child? Instead, I really feel that people will cling to what they have. The more karma they have, it's not a good thing. Just Master Shendao said, endless parents, wives, and children, they are not the enhanced condition on the Bodhi path. In every thought, we think of one another as one that brings us all into the evil path. After that, everyone goes different ways, starting to go to the retributions. Even if they are our kin, as the Infinite Life Sutra says, since their karmic path is different, there is never a time for them to. If we cannot escape from birth and death, if we want to meet each other, our paths will be different. We can't get out of our daily lives of entertainment and worldly desires. However, the real practitioners regard these things as burdensome and settle down in the silent situation of worrying about the way, not worrying about poverty. So for the Buddhist, loneliness is really kind of enjoyment, which is also kind of realm. Just as the sutra says, whenever there is trouble, one must not dwell for a moment. It was said that if a man can be in silence, he can abide in solitude, then the heavenly beings are very respectful of him. Buddha also said, staying away from home, kin, and friends, and abandoning scattered thoughts, these people are liberated. So whether it's welcoming a new wife, or having newborns, or visiting from family and friends, it's all for the sake of allowing one to have more time. And if there are hindrances to Buddha recitation, never hold them. Or do not allow the faith in the Buddha recitation to be disturbed. In short, in order to live a peaceful life, the Buddha recitation without any problems in this life, and to be able to recite the Buddha's name for a rebirth, all activities outside of Buddha recitation should be an aid to Buddha recitation. That is why Master Honen said, in short, in order for one to peacefully recite the Buddha's name and achieve rebirth, everything should be an aid to the Buddha recitation. This is the guideline of actions for all of us, the Buddha reciters in the Saha world. That is, whatever we do, whatever actions we take, exists to make Buddha recitation more convenient for us. For example, if I like to walk while reciting the Buddha's name, then for me walking is helpful in reciting the Buddha's name. I can do more than walk to recite the Buddha's name. There's also those who like to recite the Buddha's name while doing household chores, and for that person, doing household chores is need to recite the Buddha's name. For those Buddha reciters who take a bath while reciting the Buddha, then taking a bath is helpful for reciting the Buddha's name. So everything can be a good motivator to help us recite the Buddha's name more often. Master Honen continues to say the following. If one fails to aid in Buddha recitation rather to enjoy living in this life, if one just loves oneself for this purpose and lives a life of desire, one will fall into the three evil paths, for this is nothing but repeating the behavior of the hells, hungry ghosts, and animals. It becomes a fallen action. Contrary to this, in order to achieve rebirth, taking good care of one's body is an act that helps rebirth. So we are taking care of ourselves in order to be reborn in the land of ultimate bliss, which is an aid to rebirth. So Buddha reciters, when we are still alive, should treat our bodies well and try to recite the Buddha's name as comfortably as possible when we are still healthy and strong. We should recite the Buddha's name firmly and develop the habit of reciting the Buddha's name. On this New Year's Day, we need to reflect on ourselves. Have I developed the habit of reciting the Buddha's name as the main focus of my life? So at that time, after hearing Mr. Honen's teaching, Changing Fang told me, for me, I would have more time to recite the Buddha's name if I returned to my daily life in my hometown in Shizuoka, where I worked as a woodworker and recited the Buddha's name. Then regarding the reason why Changing Fang returned to his daily life, such a cause is not explained, as we have no way of knowing. Maybe that's because his parents didn't approve when he became a monk. But he didn't come across the Buddha recitation or path and thought he had to become a monk to practice the holy path. Maybe he'll be better off if you become a monk, so that's why maybe he had to become a monk. Knowing that Buddha recitation or path can be practiced by anyone, whether they're a monk or a nun, whether they're wise or not, whether they're well cultivated or not, all of them can be reborn with Buddha recitation or path. So in this way, he takes both ways. Take care of his parents and his family without hindering himself from reciting the Buddha's name for liberation. So maybe for this reason, he chose the better way, return to lay life and recite the Buddha's name. About 15 years after the rebirth of Master Honen, one of Master Honen's capable disciples, Master Longquan, was on the way to the Shizuoka area with his disciples. Mr. Longquan thought to himself, I think the Changsheng Fang lives around here, and I've not seen him for a long time, so I really want to talk with him about Master Honen. So we went to visit. Just asking around. So he asked around in his neighborhood, there must be a disciple of Mr. Honen named Changsheng Fang. After inquiring everywhere, everyone said, I don't know any such person. But there's an ordinary carpenter named Changsheng. At that moment, Mr. Long Quan wrote a letter to this carpenter, Shang Cheng. And when Shang Cheng read it, he was so happy that he came to see Mr. Long Quan. The two talked openly about this memorable memory. People around him were surprised to learn that he was a disciple of Master Honen. Mr. Long Quan said, Chan Shang Fang, you probably want to have more time for Buddha recitation, so that you can return to lay life and become a carpenter. But that's what Master Honen said. Chan Shang Fang should be among those who propagate the Buddha recitation to the people. With Master Long Quan's persuasion, Chan Shang Fang became a monk once again. At the time of separation, one of the disciples of Mr. Long Quan asked Chan Shang Fang for advice. Mr. Chang Fang, please advise me. After considering for a while, Chan Shang Fang said, it is important to establish the habit of reciting the Buddha's name. Therefore, chanting Namo Amitabha is very simple. As long as one has a mouth, anyone can do it. But it's not so simple to continue. So you have to find a way to make it a habit. If you make it a habit, then you'll be able to recite the Buddha's name effortlessly. It is like when you wake up. You don't even have to think about brushing your teeth and washing up, right? It's a habit which has been implemented into our lives. And the same thing for Buddha recitation. As soon as you open your eyes, you start reciting the Buddha. So this year I hope that you will develop the habit of reciting the Buddha's name, and then enjoy the life of reciting the Buddha's name. Okay? Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha.